But awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for being a part of this. Paul's job was to cast the vision, to share that bigger picture of there's a city to reach, there's work to do, and we're here because we do recognize there's a problem with the way we've been doing it for years and really now for generations. And so I'm going to share for just 15 minutes about mobilization. If we're going to effectively make disciples, we have to be mobilizers. We have to be getting them out there to reach people with the gospel and train them. So there's a mobilizing and equipping aspect. And then David Oates is going to bring it home, talk about multiplication. That's the result we want, is not just to train believers, but to multiply disciples and really even disciple makers. So first thing about mobilization. Last summer, one of the blessings for me with COVID was that it slowed me down. I am an impulsive leader by nature. I'm an impulsive person by personality. And so my tendency is to run and just hope people keep up. And so COVID slowed me down enough to talk with my leadership team and to listen to them. And we did a retreat two years ago in May where we used the Master Plan of Evangelism as our guidebook. And if you're not familiar with that, Robert Coleman many years ago wrote, here are the 8 things Jesus did, the way he changed the world by making and multiplying disciples. And he describes these 8 things. And on this retreat, we just talked about how are we doing at these things, how Jesus chose disciples, he invested in them, he modeled for them how to teach about the kingdom, he empowered them, he expected them to obey, then he expected them to reproduce. There's 8 things. It's a fantastic book, and you can find notes on it, or actually on the Tampa Bay for Christ website. If you want to see a little outline of it, just look up disciple making on Tampa Bay for Christ. But we were going through it, and the key point of the 8, the one that hit me and our leadership team together, the one that hit us was demonstration. If you go to Luke 9 and the sending of the 12, Coleman argues that sending of the 12 was at least 1 year into Jesus' ministry. At least a year. So you read Luke 9 and then Luke 10 with the sending of the 72, and you're like, the instructions are like nothing. Right? He's like, it's almost like the instructions are less than, it's like, don't take anything, just go, right, and preach the kingdom and heal. And how was he able, the reason he was able to send them out with such minimal instructions is for a year, they'd been watching him do it. He didn't just on the first day with Peter and Andrew, James and John, just be like, okay, go preach the kingdom. You know I'm the Lamb of God, go preach. He said, come with me to a village. Listen to how I preach the kingdom. Look at how I minister to people and heal them, right? Watch me for a year. After a year, then he said, now you go, I'll be coming behind you, and we'll debrief afterwards, we'll process this. So that totally impacted me as a leader, because I've been in ministry about 20 years, youth ministry, family ministry, and my heart has, from the beginning, been focused on outreach and reaching people with the gospel. And what I realized in that moment was, for 20 years and for 2 years, I've been in Tampa for 4 years now, and at that point I've been here too. And I realized for most of that time, I have been telling people, preaching to people, telling them to share the gospel and make disciples, but I had not been showing them. And I don't know what you guys have in terms of interest, but I've been a soccer coach. I have 4 boys that are now 2 in college and 1 in high school, 1 in middle school. And so I've coached a lot of soccer. And can you imagine a soccer coach who sat down his 6-year-olds and said, let me tell you how to kick a soccer ball. Here's what you do. Just picture that ball in front of you. You're going to plant your left foot next to the ball. You're going to swing your right foot, and you want to get the right. Can you imagine a soccer coach who said, now we're not going to actually go out on the field. We're going to do this practice today in a boardroom, but I'm going to tell you about a soccer ball, right? I mean, that's absurd, right? But when it comes to evangelism in particular, isn't that most of the time how we do it? We sit in a room, and that's one of the reasons I think Revive has been very helpful for a lot of churches in Tampa Bay, is it's like, we're going to train you for 30 minutes, and then we're going to take you out into the streets, and we're going to share the gospel. And if you're not sure how to do it, just watch, because you're going to have somebody with you who's done this before, and you learn from them, and then maybe the second encounter, you can share and use the Bible in the bands and stuff. So that really struck us as a leadership team. We've been telling people to share the gospel. We've not been slowing down enough to show them. My favorite illustration of this is if you've heard of Stephen Ambrose, the historian. He wrote Band of Brothers. It's probably his most famous book. the even better book than that is called Citizen Soldiers. It tells the rest of the story of the European theater and the conquest of the Allies in World War II. One of the great scenes in that is they've conquered at Normandy, they've established the beachhead, they're rolling through France, and they're going through the hedgerows and the small towns, and this 2-star general comes up on a squad of 4 men, and he finds them hunkered down behind a tree, and he's like, "What are you doing?" They point ahead at a house that has Germans in it that are shooting at him from about 100 yards away, and he's like, "What are you doing? Go take the house." And they're like, "Sorry, sir, we don't know what to do. We don't know, they're shooting at us." And he says, "All right, you two go over there, lay down covering fire, you two come with me, get your grenades." And as soon as the covering fire starts, the Germans' heads drop in the window. This general leads these 2 privates across this field 100 yards with grenades in their hands. Halfway across, they pull their pins, they go over, he says, "You hit the left window, I'll hit the right window, you hit the upstairs window." They throw their grenades in, the grenades go boom. As soon as they boom, he kicks the door in, they come in with their machine guns, and all the Germans go like this. As soon as they're done with that encounter, they took that house, he comes out with these guys, and they're like, "That was amazing, we've never seen anything like that." He says, "There's the next house. Go get it." Go get it. I mean, what a picture of leadership, right? Not conceptually in a room, taking them off to get a whiteboard and saying, "Here's how you would." He says, "Let me show you, then you go get it." And so this is what we've been trying to do for the last year, and that's my first principle here for mobilization. Don't just tell, we've got to show. We've got to show them. This is how everybody does training. Medical staff, it's always about watch one, do one, teach one, right? This is how we got to bring it into our disciple making. And as leaders, it starts with us setting the example. And that's what I realized is I've been telling my 1 or 2 kind of exceptional God stories. And that summer of 2019, I was sitting on, I don't fly very often, but I was up in Chicago for a conference, and sitting next to me was a 30-year-old guy named Mike who, you sit down on the plane, and he's got his earbuds in, and I'm like, sweet, this is a flight I can read, So I sit down, and as soon as I open my book, he chimes in and says, "What are you reading?" And I'm coming from a church conference, I'm like, I don't know, something on leadership. And so for 90 minutes, the whole ride, the whole flight, we're chatting and getting to know each other. Turns out, his sister is the exact GI doctor specialist that my son desperately needed in that moment. Totally changed our lives. Getting connected with a J-pouch ulcerative colitis specialist right here at USF Morsani. He literally gave me her cell phone and said, "If the office doesn't give you an appointment, text her." And I eventually did. It was amazing. But in the process, he says, "You know what? A year ago, my mom had what we thought was terminal cancer. And I made a promise to God, if she was okay, if she came through that, I would go back to church and get right with God. And it turns out that 6 months ago, she was totally fine, and I haven't done anything with it. Do you think God's trying to tell me something?" So here's a guy, and he's gradually gotten involved in our church and helped with our soccer programs. So I tell stories like that, and people are like, what I found was, it's a cool story for us as pastors, and it's one of those, God is at work, and he orchestrates things. But I found those kind of stories are actually, in a way, counterproductive to the average Christian. It's better to share stories like my next door neighbor, something that everyone can relate to. And I've been connecting with our next door neighbor, as a guy named Roger, and his wife Rhonda just passed away after 9 years with Alzheimer's. So we've been in that house for 3 years now up in Land O'Lakes, and over those years we've just gradually gotten to know Roger and his son Andy, who lives there, and having conversations and connecting and seeing Rhonda in her slow decline, sitting out there giving out candy together at Halloween and having those conversations. And we went, and when Rhonda finally passed, they invited me to come to her celebration of life right at their house and share, and even invited me to close the time in prayer. And so those kind of things are more relatable. It's like, this is my next door neighbor. These are conversations that I can have almost every day, and getting to know Roger, and then the Puerto Rican guy across the street whose name is Vita, and just having conversations. He's always there. And so taking that conversation to the next level, and how can I engage with them spiritually, and moving those conversations along. That's the key principle. It's not just tell, it's got to be show. And working with those leaders to show them how to restructure their lives and create more space for God to work. And that's my second principle for you today, is training. We have to become trainers who lead by example, but then provide the practical tools to help people actually begin to do this. The tool that we use is a little book called God Space, and it's a good evangelism book, simple, short, that kind of brings you into a 21st century means of evangelism that's very relational, very much about listening and engaging with people. But the application, what helped our church was not so much that book as the process. We built little, we call them huddles, little groups of 3 or 4, and our goal for that year, after that retreat with Master Plan, our goal for that next year was to take our entire leadership team of 20-25 people through God Space, whether it was meeting once a month or once a week, however, it was just 8 sessions, and take them through. And the first group to go through it was our elder team. And as we were going, we were like, do we have space in our life? What's the concept we latched onto was fishing pools, you know? I didn't catch any fish last year, because I never go fishing. So I'm not surprised that I didn't catch any fish last year. So you apply that to your evangelism. When's the last time you led someone to Christ? Well, if it's been a long time, but you never share the gospel, and you never engage with people, you're not casting lines in the water, you don't have places where you connect with non-believers so you can build relationship and have conversations, we shouldn't be surprised that we're not catching fish spiritually if we're not fishing spiritually. So that started in our leadership team saying, where is your pond? Where is your venue? Where do you go to have contact with non-believers? It could be your neighborhood, could be your workplace. Jason and I, Jason's my associate here, Jason and I shifted doing our meetings to our local Panera. We said, we have no contact. We sit in our office at church. We're not going to have any contact. Let's meet at Panera. And over the last 2 years, we've probably had conversations with 12 different people in that Panera just from being regular customers there. So that was part of our not just telling but showing and beginning a training program. And God's Space got us started on that. And now this year, this summer, what we've shifted to do is broaden that training concept to all of disciple making. We use Rick Warren's baseball diamond as our disciple-making pathway. It's just clear, it's simple, it's like, it conveys you gotta be in the game, you gotta be moving, we don't wanna leave anybody on base and just coming to worship. It is a version of this, I realize, but that's our disciple-making concept of moving people along the bases and then turning them into coaches and bring people along behind you. But now what we're trying to do is build huddles that will focus on any of those bases. First base being love God, develop a relationship with Him. Second base being growing in Christ, maturing in your walk with Him. Third base, serving the church. And then home plate being reach the world, becoming a missional. So God's Space was moving people in a sense from third base to home. From being committed to the church to then being missional in your lifestyle. And now we're forming little huddles to say, how can we take mostly starting with our leaders still, through to what's their area of need. And so this has been my commitment for the fall. In these last couple months, coming out of our elders retreat we just did in September, to say we got to become a disciple-making leadership team. And so we're trying to restructure our schedules. I'm personally trying to restructure my schedule so most of my week is disciple-making huddles. I've got one group I just met with yesterday morning of two middle-aged guys in our church, both that have been a part of the church for a long time, and both independently contacted me saying, I really have never had a quiet time. One guy was just saying he's struggling with happiness and stuff, and the other guy was struggling with some health issues, but both were saying the same thing. I don't really know how to develop my relationship with God. So we started going through a spiritual disciplines book and just talking with them about, in a sense, that first base. But I told them from the beginning, we're going to spend about a year together, but my expectation after that year is that you would pay it forward. That after we meet and we spend this time together, I'll probably work the whole cycle with them and go on to a discipleship maturity book with them second, and then on into mission with them, but with that expectation that as we meet together, it's developing a model so then you can grab a couple guys and bring them along behind you. It's about creating that culture of disciple making. And with that, I'll hand it off to David to talk about multiplication, because we don't want to just make disciples, we want to move towards this multiplication of disciples. So, David, here you go. Bring it on first.
Darin, thank you. It was an honor just to all that God has brought through you.